What if the very part of yourself you've tried hardest to bury is the one that holds the key to your freedom? Most of us like to believe we know who we are. We tell ourselves stories. I'm kind, I'm hardworking, I'm forgiving, maybe even spiritual. But have you ever wondered what lives behind that carefully polished mask? What if there's another you, hiding in the dark, shaping your choices when you're not looking? Carl Jung called this hidden side the shadow. And here's the unsettling truth. The shadow doesn't vanish just because you ignore it. It slips into your triggers. It hides in your jealousy. It shows up in the people you can't stand and the habits you can't break. Think back to the last time someone really got under your skin. Maybe it was their arrogance, maybe their laziness, maybe just a careless remark. Why did it sting so much? Often, it's because their behavior mirrors something inside you, something you've disowned, denied, or pushed away. Picture this. You have a closet in your house. Every time you feel something you don't like, anger, envy, shame, fear, you stuff it into that closet. You tell yourself, I don't have time for this. I don't want to be this person. I'll just lock it away. At first, the room looks clean. But as the years pass, the closet swells, the door bulges, and one day, it bursts open. Everything you thought you had hidden spills out at the worst possible moment. That's the shadow. The more you try to push it away, the stronger it gets. But here's the paradox. Inside that darkness lies not only your deepest fear, but also your hidden power. The anger you repress could become the fire that protects your boundaries. The envy you deny could point to your truest desires. The sadness you avoid could open your heart to compassion. Jung believed that when we integrate the shadow, we don't just heal old wounds, we reclaim lost energy, creativity, and wholeness. So the real question is, how do you face it? How do you walk into that dark closet without being swallowed by it? This journey isn't about theory, it's about practice. Rituals that ground you, reflections that reveal the truth, and results you can feel in your daily life. Over the next hour, we'll walk this path together step by step, from recognizing the shadow, to confronting it, to weaving it back into a more authentic version of yourself. And stay with me until the end, because the last insight is the one Jung himself called the most dangerous and also the most liberating. We live in a culture that celebrates the highlight reel. Scroll through social media and you'll see smiles, vacations, achievements, picture-perfect homes. What you won't see are the doubts, the grudges, the sleepless nights replaying regrets. Yet those hidden parts are just as real. They don't vanish simply because they go unposted. That's why shadow work matters now more than ever. It asks us to turn toward the very parts of ourselves that society tells us to deny. Think about the messages we're fed all the time. Stay positive. Don't dwell on negativity. Just move on. On the surface, those words sound uplifting. But if you follow them blindly, they create a dangerous split inside. We suppress anger instead of listening to what it's telling us. We bury grief instead of letting it cleanse us. We numb envy instead of noticing the longing beneath it. But what we suppress doesn't disappear. It leaks out sideways in sarcasm, in burnout, in a sudden burst of irritation over something trivial. That's the shadow knocking at the door. Jung described the shadow as the dark twin of the persona, the mask we wear in public. If your persona says, "I am generous," your shadow may hold the selfish part you'd rather hide. If your persona says, "I'm calm," your shadow may carry the rage you've never allowed yourself to feel. Neither side is false, both belong to you. But until you acknowledge the shadow, you're only living half a life. Why is this so urgent today? Because modern life pushes us to be on all the time. At work, you're expected to be confident and efficient. In relationships, loving and forgiving. Online, polished and inspiring. But no human being can keep that performance going forever. With every unspoken no, with every unexpressed truth, with every dream abandoned because it doesn't fit the image you've built, the shadow grows heavier. Think about relationships. Have you ever noticed yourself dating the same type of partner again and again, even when it ends badly every time? Or maybe you've had recurring clashes with bosses or coworkers, almost like déjà vu. That's the shadow at work. We project our denied traits onto others, accusing them of being controlling, needy, arrogant, while forgetting that those same traits are alive inside us too. Shadow work interrupts that cycle. It gives you a moment to pause, to reflect, to ask, what part of me is being mirrored right now? Instead of exploding or withdrawing, you get curious. You stop seeing the shadow as an enemy and begin to see it as a teacher. And here's the surprising part. Integrating the shadow doesn't just make you calmer or nicer, it makes you whole. The creativity you thought you lost? It might be hiding in the envy you've denied. The confidence you crave? It could be bound up in the anger you've been taught to fear. The depth of love you seek? It might be waiting on the other side of grief you've avoided for years. Jung put it clearly. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Growth doesn't come by bypassing the shadow, it comes by walking straight through it. And what does that look like? Sometimes it's journaling after a conflict to trace the emotions beneath your reaction. Sometimes it's noticing a pattern that shows up again and again in your dreams. Sometimes it's creating a simple ritual that lets you encounter anger, fear, or desire without judgment. Shadow work isn't a one-time revelation. It's an ongoing practice, a lifelong conversation with yourself. With each step, you uncover the parts you've exiled and invite them back home. And why does this matter for everyday life? Because when you do this inner work, the outer world shifts. You set boundaries without guilt. You communicate more clearly. You stop projecting old wounds onto new situations. You move through life with authenticity instead of performance. And here's something beautiful. People around you feel it. They may not know the language of shadow work, but they sense your wholeness. They notice your calm in conflict, your honesty in connection, your depth in creativity. That's the ripple effect of integration. So, if this work is so transformative, why don't more people do it? Because it's uncomfortable. It asks you to face what you've avoided for years. But think back to that closet stuffed with all the feelings you didn't want to deal with. Opening it may be messy, but it's the only way to breathe freely again. This path isn't easy, but it is worth it, and you don't have to do it all at once. Small steps, one reflection, one ritual, one honest conversation at a time, add up to lasting change. In the next part, we'll dive into a story, a myth, that paints the shadow more vividly than any definition ever could. And we'll see how that story connects to real life in ways you'll recognize immediately. Let me tell you a story. There's an old myth about a hero who set out to slay a dragon. The dragon terrorized the village, hoarded treasure, and breathed fire. Everyone feared it, and the hero believed that destroying the beast would bring peace. So he marched out, sword in hand, fueled by courage. After days of fighting, bruised and exhausted, he finally drove the blade into the dragon's heart. The beast collapsed. Victory at last? Not exactly. Because as the dragon fell, something unexpected happened. From its wound, a radiant light began to shine. And in that light, the hero saw his own reflection. The dragon wasn't just a monster, it was part of him. That story captures the essence of shadow work. We imagine the shadow as an enemy, our anger, jealousy, shame, or fear. We spend years trying to kill those parts, numbing them, burying them, pretending they don't exist. But when we finally face them, we discover something shocking: the dragon guards treasure. The shadow holds power we desperately need. Let's bring this myth into real life. Think about Sarah. On the surface, she's the perfect colleague. Reliable, helpful, always smiling. But inside, she's exhausted. She never says no. She picks up the slack when others drop the ball. She tells herself she's just being kind. But deep down, resentment is building. Every time she swallows her irritation, that closet door creaks louder. Until one day, she explodes over something small. Sarah's dragon isn't her coworkers. It's her own shadow, the anger she's denied, the boundaries she's ignored. Hidden inside her shadow is the treasure of assertiveness, the power to say no without guilt. But until she faces that dragon, the fire leaks out in ways she can't control. Now think about David. He prides himself on being calm, rational, unshakable. People admire his composure, but in private, his partner feels a painful distance. Every argument ends with him withdrawing. He doesn't shout, but he doesn't connect either. His shadow is the anger he refuses to acknowledge. By banishing it, he's lost not only the fire of anger but also the passion that keeps love alive. His dragon guards the treasure of vitality and authentic expression. We all have stories like these, don't we? Times when our reactions shocked us. Times when someone triggered us in ways we couldn't explain. These are dragon moments. The shadow showing up, demanding to be seen. And the lesson of the myth is clear. The hero doesn't find treasure by avoiding the dragon or by killing it. The treasure is released only when he faces it directly, realizing the dragon is part of himself. That's the heart of shadow work. It's not about erasing anger, envy, or fear. It's about asking, what treasure is this feeling guarding? What energy is locked away here? Take envy, for example. Most people hate admitting it. It feels petty, shameful, unspiritual. But envy is a signal. It points to something you desire but haven't allowed yourself to claim. If you feel a pang when a friend succeeds, that shadow energy is whispering, "You want this too. You're capable of it too." If you listen instead of denying it, envy becomes a guide toward your true longings. Or look at fear. Fear can feel like a wall, blocking opportunities. We label ourselves lazy or indecisive, but fear often marks the edge of growth. It tells us where transformation is waiting. Inside fear's shadow is the treasure of courage. Even anger, one of the most misunderstood emotions, holds gifts. Anger points to boundaries being crossed, to something valuable being threatened. Without anger, you can't protect what you love. Its treasure is clarity and strength. See how this changes things? When you stop seeing the shadow as an enemy and start treating it as a messenger, life shifts. Conflicts turn into mirrors. Triggers become teachers. Painful emotions reveal their gifts. The dragon becomes an ally. And this is where rituals and reflections come in. They give you safe ways to meet the dragon without getting scorched. Instead of suppressing envy, you can write it down and ask, what does this reveal about my desires? Instead of denying anger, you can move with it through breath, journaling, or a walk that lets your body release the heat. Instead of running from fear, you can lean in and ask, what is this trying to protect me from? Every shadow carries both poison and medicine. The poison is what happens when you deny it, outbursts, projections, sabotage. The medicine is what happens when you integrate it. Energy, creativity, wholeness. The dragon isn't going anywhere. But when you recognize it as part of you, when you honor the treasure it guards, life begins to feel more authentic. You stop wasting energy on hiding. You stop fearing the inevitable. You reclaim the parts of yourself you thought were gone. And that's just the beginning. Because the shadow doesn't only appear in myths or isolated stories. It shows up in everyday signs, subtle but powerful. In the next part, we'll uncover the first 3 signs that your shadow is shaping your life right now. And once you see them, you'll never look at yourself the same way again. How do you know when the shadow is running the show? It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear a label. It sneaks in quietly, shaping the way you speak, love, and work often without you realizing it. Let's look at 3 of the clearest signs. First sign, intense reactions to others. Have you ever met someone who rubbed you the wrong way instantly? Maybe they seemed arrogant, maybe lazy, maybe selfish or overly dramatic. And you felt an emotional surge that was way bigger than the situation called for. That's projection, one of the shadow's favorite disguises. The traits you can't accept in yourself often appear exaggerated in others. If you pride yourself on being selfless, you might feel anger rise when someone else puts themselves first. But deep down, your shadow may hold the part of you that longs to do the same. The key here isn't blame. It's curiosity. When someone triggers you, pause and ask, what about them feels so unbearable to me? Could this be reflecting something I've buried in myself? This doesn't mean excusing bad behavior. It means recognizing the mirror being held up. A simple practice. Next time you feel that rush of judgment, write down 3 words to describe the other person. Then flip them back onto yourself. Where might this live in me? When have I shown this trait? even in small ways. The answers may surprise you. Second sign, patterns you can't escape. Have you noticed the same story playing out over and over? The same fights, just with different partners. The same frustrations, just with different bosses. The same disappointment, repeating like déjà vu. That's the shadow repeating the script until you finally pay attention. Someone who always feels unappreciated at work may switch jobs again and again, but the resentment follows. Another person may keep choosing partners who are emotionally distant. Different names, same outcome. What's happening underneath? Often, it's a buried belief. I don't deserve recognition. I'm not worthy of love. It's unsafe to express my anger. Until those shadow beliefs are faced, the outer story doesn't change. A practice here. Journal about your top 3 recurring frustrations. Ask yourself, what's the common thread? What role do I play in each situation? What might my shadow be trying to teach me through this repetition? Third sign, emotional extremes, either overreaction or numbness. Sometimes the shadow bursts out like a flood. You snap at a friend over something small. You panic at harmless feedback. You cry uncontrollably over a minor mistake. Other times, the shadow clamps down like a lid. You feel nothing. No joy, no sadness, just flat. Both are signals. Overreaction means the shadow is spilling out from that overstuffed closet we talked about earlier. Numbness means the shadow has put a heavy blanket over your feelings, protecting you from something it believes you can't handle. Picture losing your temper because your partner left dishes in the sink. You know it's not about the dishes. The shadow might be carrying years of unspoken resentment. Or imagine being unable to cry, even in moments of deep loss. That numbness may be your shadow shielding you from grief you once decided was unbearable. A practice here. When you notice an overreaction, pause and ask, what's the bigger story here? What am I really angry, sad, or scared about? And if you notice numbness, gently ask, what feeling might be hiding underneath this flatness? If I weren't afraid, what would I allow myself to feel? These 3 signs, strong reactions, repeating patterns, and emotional extremes, are some of the shadow's clearest fingerprints. They remind us that what we repress doesn't disappear. It just finds another way out. And once you start spotting these patterns, something powerful happens. You realize you have a choice. You can keep being driven by unconscious forces, or you can begin to face them directly. But these are just the surface signs. The shadow also whispers in quieter ways, subtler, trickier, but just as powerful once you catch them. In the next part, we'll uncover 3 of those subtle signs, and you may recognize them in places you never thought to look. By now you've seen how loudly the shadow can speak through projections, patterns, and emotional extremes. But here's the thing. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. And those whispers can shape our lives just as much as the louder signs. Let's explore 3 of them. Fourth sign, self-sabotage and resistance. You set a goal. You feel motivated. Maybe it's starting a side business, committing to the gym, or opening yourself up in relationships, but then something strange happens. You procrastinate. You pick fights. You miss deadlines. You derail yourself in ways that make no sense. That's often the shadow at play. One part of you longs for growth, but another part, hidden and unacknowledged, fears what growth might bring. Maybe success feels unsafe because deep down you carry the belief you don't deserve it. Maybe intimacy feels threatening because the shadow is still guarding old wounds of rejection. The shadow resists change, not out of cruelty, but out of protection. It would rather you stay small and safe than risk pain again. Try this. The next time you notice resistance, pause and ask, what's the hidden payoff of staying stuck? What does my shadow think it's protecting me from? Naming the fear loosens its grip. Fifth sign, identifying with being good. Another subtle sign is clinging too tightly to a fixed identity. The good one, the nice one, the selfless one. On the surface, this looks admirable. Who wouldn't want to be kind and generous? But when it becomes rigid, it creates imbalance. If you're always the giver, you never allow yourself to receive. If you're always the peacemaker, you never allow yourself to express anger. If you're always the strong one, You never let yourself show weakness. The shadow grows in these neglected corners. You end up exhausted, resentful, secretly longing for the freedom to be more than just good. Think of a friend who insists she never gets angry, yet she gossips sharply when others aren't around. Or a coworker who prides himself on being logical, yet secretly mocks anyone who shows emotion. These are shadows balancing out overly rigid personas. Try asking yourself, what identity do I cling to most? And what qualities do I avoid because they don't fit that identity? Chances are your shadow is hiding in the very traits you've pushed aside. Sixth sign, dreams and slips of the tongue. Jung called dreams the theater of the unconscious. What you repress during the day often sneaks out at night in symbolic form. Ever had a dream where you did something that shocked you? Maybe you were violent, maybe greedy, maybe reckless. Or maybe a dream character embodied the traits you despise in others. That's your shadow speaking, showing you what you don't want to see in waking life. The same happens in unguarded moments, a slip of the tongue, a blunt joke, a truth you didn't mean to blurt. Those aren't accidents. They're the shadow poking through the cracks. A simple step: keep a dream journal by your bed. Even if you only remember fragments, write them down. Then ask, what qualities in this dream make me uncomfortable? How might they reflect parts of me I've denied? Over time, patterns will emerge. These three signs, self-sabotage, clinging to being good, and messages from dreams may not be as loud as projections or emotional outbursts, but they're just as revealing. They show you that the shadow is always present, shaping choices even in silence. And the more you notice, the more clearly you see its fingerprints. That clarity gives you freedom, because once you see the pattern, you no longer have to act it out unconsciously. But there are even deeper signs, ones that live further beneath the surface, tied to our deepest fears and longings. They're harder to face, but if you do, they carry the greatest potential for transformation. In the next part, we'll uncover 3 of these hidden layers of the shadow, and they may just change how you see yourself forever. Up to this point, we've been exploring the surface and subtle signs of the shadow, the triggers, the patterns, the slips that catch us off guard. But the shadow doesn't just hide in obvious places. It also buries itself deep in the layers of who we are, shaping the core of our identity. These hidden signs are harder to notice, but once you see them, they can open the door to profound transformation. 7th sign, the fear of being truly seen. Think about how often you edit yourself. At work, maybe you hide your creativity because you don't want to be labeled weird. In relationships, maybe you downplay your needs because you're scared they'll be rejected. This constant filtering isn't just politeness, it's fear. That fear often comes from early wounds. Somewhere along the way, you may have learned that being yourself was unsafe. Maybe someone told you to tone it down. Maybe a moment of vulnerability was met with ridicule. And so the shadow decided, better to hide. The cost is heavy. You can be surrounded by people yet still feel invisible. You can be admired but never truly known. You perform instead of connecting. Here's a practice. In a safe space, reveal one small truth you usually hide. Notice how it feels to be seen. Each time you do this, you reclaim a piece of yourself that the shadow tried to bury. 8th sign, the split between public and private self. Of course, we all have different sides. But when the gap between who you are in public and who you are in private feels unbridgeable, the shadow is often at work. In public, you may seem confident, cheerful, put together. In private, you may feel lonely, resentful, or insecure. It's as if you're living 2 lives, one polished, one hidden. That split is exhausting. It takes enormous energy to maintain an image that doesn't match your inner truth. And the wider the gap, the greater the risk of collapse, sudden burnout, breakdowns, or impulsive choices that shock even you. Reflection here. Ask yourself, where do I feel the greatest divide between my outer image and my inner reality? What would it take to close that gap, even just a little? Even small steps toward alignment can free up incredible energy. 9th sign, hidden self-contempt. This one may be the hardest to face. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, You're not good enough. You don't matter. You'll never get it right. On the outside, you may look confident, even successful. But underneath, the shadow carries an inner critic, often inherited from the past. Maybe it echoes a parent's harsh words, a teacher's criticism, or the sting of rejection from peers. Over time, that voice becomes internal, woven into your sense of self. The result? No matter what you achieve, it never feels like enough. No matter how much love you receive, you can't fully take it in. The shadow sabotages joy with quiet shame. Here's something you can try. When that inner voice speaks, write down its exact words. Then ask yourself, whose voice is this really? Where did I first learn to talk to myself this way? Tracing it back helps you separate your true self from the old shadow script. These deeper signs, the fear of being seen, the split between public and private, and hidden self-contempt, show how the shadow can shape not just your reactions, but your very identity. They're subtle, but once you notice them, they reveal the path to healing at the deepest level. And here's the paradox. The things you most want to hide are often the exact places where your greatest freedom waits. The moment you face the fear of being seen, you taste real connection. The moment you close the gap between outer and inner, you feel whole. The moment you soften self-contempt, you reclaim the ability to love yourself. Up until now, we've focused on recognizing the shadow. But recognition is only the beginning. To truly integrate it, you need practices, ways to meet those hidden parts safely, to listen, to release, and to transform. In the next part, we'll dive into powerful journaling and ritual exercises that make this work practical and real. So far, we've uncovered stories, metaphors, and signs that reveal how the shadow moves in our lives. But awareness alone isn't enough. Knowing your shadow is there is like spotting smoke. To put out the fire, you need practice. You need tools that help you meet these hidden parts directly, instead of just thinking about them. One of the most powerful tools is journaling. Paired with simple rituals, it becomes a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind, a safe way to bring the shadow into the light without getting overwhelmed. Practice 1. The Trigger Journal. Whenever you feel a strong emotional reaction, irritation, jealousy, shame, or anger, grab a notebook. Write down the situation in plain words. Who was involved? What did they say or do? How did you feel in your body? Then ask yourself 3 questions. What did this remind me of? What part of me felt attacked or threatened? What might this reaction be revealing about something I haven't accepted in myself? For example, if a coworker brags and it drives you crazy, your shadow may be holding your own longing to be recognized. The trigger isn't just about them, it's about what lives in you. Practice 2. Dialogue with the shadow. Set aside 10 minutes. Imagine sitting across from your shadow. Start writing a conversation. Begin with a simple question. What do you want me to know? Then let the words flow without censorship. The shadow often speaks bluntly. I'm tired of being ignored. I want you to admit you're angry. I want you to stop pretending you're fine. You don't have to agree with every word that comes through. The point is to listen. Practice 3. The Golden Shadow List. Not all shadow material is dark or painful. Sometimes, we repress positive qualities too. Think about the people you admire most. Write down their traits: courage, creativity, charisma, compassion. Then ask yourself, why do I admire them so much? Could these qualities already live in me, waiting to be claimed? Admiration can be projection, just like judgment. The golden shadow is the light we exile because we're afraid of being judged, rejected, or of failing if we shine too brightly. Reclaiming those qualities unlocks hidden strengths. Practice 4. The Ritual of Release. Journaling brings awareness, but rituals give the psyche a sense of closure. Try this. Write down a trait or feeling you've struggled to accept, maybe anger, envy, or fear. Read it aloud. Say, I see you. You're part of me. Then burn the paper safely in a bowl or fireplace. Watch the smoke rise, and imagine the energy transforming, not disappearing, but becoming fuel for growth. This simple act tells your unconscious, I'm ready to acknowledge what I've denied. Practice 5. The Daily Check. In. At the end of each day, Ask yourself 2 questions. When did I feel most triggered today? When did I feel most alive? The triggers point toward shadow wounds. The aliveness points toward shadow gifts. Over time, patterns emerge that show both what needs healing and what's waiting to be reclaimed. These practices don't take hours. Even 10 minutes a day can change how you relate to yourself. The key is consistency. The unconscious doesn't open up all at once. It responds slowly, with trust, as you show up again and again. And remember, shadow work is not about judgment, it's about curiosity. Instead of saying, "I shouldn't feel envy," try asking, "What does this envy reveal about what I desire?" Instead of shutting down anger, ask, "What boundary is being crossed here?" Think of it like archaeology. You're brushing away dust, uncovering hidden artifacts of your psyche. Some will be painful, some will be golden. All of them belong to you. With time, you'll notice changes, fewer explosive reactions, more clarity in decision-making, deeper compassion for yourself and others. This isn't overnight transformation. It's steady, embodied change, the kind that lasts. And while journaling is powerful alone, you don't have to do it by yourself. Sharing your reflections with a trusted friend, therapist, or group can deepen the process. Sometimes another person's perspective helps you see what your own eyes can't. Now, we've seen how practices help you face the shadow within yourself. But nothing stirs the shadow more than love and intimacy. In the next part, we'll step into that territory, how the shadow plays out in relationships, and how those closest to us often become the clearest mirrors of what we've hidden. If there's one place where the shadow shows itself most clearly, it's in love. Intimacy has a way of stripping away the polished image we show the world. It exposes the raw, hidden parts we'd rather keep buried. Jung once said, "If you want to meet your shadow, fall in love." The mirror of intimacy. When you're close to someone, you can't help but project parts of yourself onto them. The qualities you admire may reflect your golden shadow, your hidden strengths. And the qualities that drive you crazy often mirror the traits you've denied in yourself. Take Emma and Chris. Emma prides herself on being organized and responsible. Chris is spontaneous, sometimes careless. Emma gets frustrated. Why can't he just plan ahead? But beneath her irritation lies envy. Her shadow longs for freedom, for letting go of control. Chris reflects the part of her she doesn't allow herself to be. On the other hand, Chris feels stifled by Emma's structure. He complains she's rigid, but deep down he admires her stability. His shadow resists responsibility, yet secretly craves it. Each partner mirrors the other's denied qualities. Conflict and attraction are 2 sides of the same shadow coin. The shadow dance. Relationships often become a stage where 2 shadows dance. At first, the attraction is magnetic. We're drawn to what we've exiled. Later, those same traits become sources of conflict. That's why couples often say, "The very thing that attracted me is now what drives me crazy." But the shadow doesn't show up to ruin love. It shows up to deepen it. Arguments, irritation, even heartbreak, these are mirrors showing us what we need to integrate. Next time conflict rises, pause and ask, what is my partner showing me about myself? What trait of mine is being mirrored here? The reflection may be uncomfortable, but it can transform a fight into an opportunity for growth. The hidden wounds. Love also awakens old shadow wounds from childhood. If you grew up fearing abandonment, your shadow may carry that fear into adulthood, surfacing as jealousy or clinginess. If you grew up feeling unseen, your shadow may long for constant validation, leaving you disappointed when your partner can't read your mind. These wounds don't mean you're broken. They mean your shadow is trying to protect you, but unless you notice them, you'll keep reenacting the past in the present. A useful reflection. Think about the strongest emotional reactions you've had in relationships. Then ask, does this remind me of something earlier in life? What old wound might my shadow be carrying into this moment? Naming it gives you the power to respond consciously instead of repeating old cycles. The gift of shadow work in love. When 2 people practice shadow work together, relationships transform. Instead of blaming, you begin to own your projections. Instead of demanding perfection, you embrace wholeness, light, and dark together. Picture a couple where one partner admits, "When I accuse you of being selfish, I'm really noticing my own buried desire to take up space." Or, "When I get angry at your distance, I realize I'm facing my own fear of closeness." Conversations like these turn the shadow from an enemy into an ally. And this doesn't only apply to romantic love. Friendships, family bonds, even work relationships carry the same dynamic. Wherever there's closeness, there's projection. And wherever there's projection, there's shadow. The courage to stay. Here's the paradox. The closer you get to someone, the more your shadow will rise. That's why many people run when intimacy gets real. It feels safer to chase the honeymoon phase forever than to face the raw edges true love reveals. But if you stay, if you face the discomfort instead of fleeing, relationships become a crucible for growth. They burn away illusions. They force honesty. And what survives is not naive or idealized love, but a deeper, more resilient bond. Relationships aren't about avoiding conflict or pretending to be flawless. They're about holding up a mirror to each other, facing what appears, and choosing to grow together. That's the gift of shadow work in love. Intimacy that's deeper, trust that's stronger, and the freedom to be fully seen. In the next part, we'll step out of the personal and into the social. Because the shadow doesn't just shape private life, it also weaves itself into our work, our communities, and the culture we live in every day. The shadow doesn't only live in our private worlds of love and intimacy. It also shapes how we show up in work, friendships, and the wider community. In fact, the workplace and social settings often stir the shadow more intensely than anything else because these spaces demand masks, roles, and constant performance. The workplace persona. At work, most of us put on a mask. Maybe it's the competent professional. Maybe it's the team player or the go-getter. Masks aren't bad, they help us function. But when we cling too tightly to them, the shadow builds in the background. Imagine someone who prides themselves on being endlessly productive. They stay late, take on every project, never admit exhaustion. Everyone praises their drive. But under the surface, resentment brews. Burnout grows. One day, a small criticism triggers a full collapse. The hard worker mask has been hiding the shadow of fatigue, vulnerability, and the need for rest. Reflection. Ask yourself, what role do I play most strongly at work? What qualities do I suppress to keep that role alive? Noticing this can help you rebalance before the shadow erupts. Group dynamics and projections. The shadow doesn't just shape individuals at work, it shapes groups. Have you noticed how teams unconsciously assign roles? One person becomes the responsible one, another the rebel, another the caretaker. These labels may feel natural, but they often reflect projections. A group might exile certain traits by dumping them onto one person. Think of a workplace scapegoating one employee as lazy or difficult. That person is forced to carry the shadow the group won't acknowledge. Families do it too. The black sheep often holds the qualities everyone else refuses to face. Reflection. Ask yourself, what role do I keep being given in groups? Am I carrying part of the group's shadow? That awareness helps you step out of other people's projections. The polished self online. Nowhere is the split between persona and shadow clearer than on social media. Online, we show curated lives, vacations, smiles, achievements. Rarely do we show the doubts, failures, or shame. But the shadow doesn't disappear in digital spaces. It slips out in comparison, envy, trolling, or endless scrolling. Maybe you see a peer's post and suddenly feel small. Maybe you catch yourself judging others harshly. These are shadow signals. What you suppress in yourself gets stirred by what you see in others. Next time you feel triggered online, pause and ask, what part of me is this post stirring? What desire or fear is being touched? Turning the mirror inward transforms social media from a trap into a tool for self-awareness. Cultural shadows. The shadow doesn't just appear in individuals or groups, it runs through whole cultures. When a society prides itself on freedom, its shadow may hide control. When it celebrates innovation, its shadow may hide waste. When it values toughness, its shadow may hide a deep fear of vulnerability. Take a company culture that insists on constant positivity. On the surface, it looks inspiring. But beneath, employees feel shamed for admitting stress. Or consider a society that idolizes strength and independence. Its shadow may leave no room for people to admit they need help. Reflection. Notice the unspoken rules of your workplace or community. Ask, what qualities are celebrated here? Which ones are exiled? This awareness can help you resist being unconsciously swept into the collective shadow. Work and social life are testing grounds for shadow work. They challenge you to balance authenticity with persona, to see through projections, and to resist collective blind spots. And here's the beautiful part. When you integrate your shadow in these spaces, you don't just change yourself, you shift the environment around you. An employee who sets healthy boundaries inspires others to do the same. A friend who admits jealousy opens the door for honest conversations. A leader who owns mistakes makes the culture more human. The shadow is contagious, but so is integration. In the next part, we'll explore one of the trickiest areas where the shadow hides spirituality, because sometimes, even in the search for light, the shadow finds clever ways to disguise itself. One of the most surprising places the shadow hides is in spirituality itself. We often imagine that seeking the light will free us from darkness. But if we're not careful, the very practices we turn to for healing can become tools the shadow uses to stay hidden. What spiritual bypassing looks like. Spiritual bypassing happens when we use spiritual ideas or rituals to avoid facing pain. It sounds like this: everything happens for a reason, so I don't need to feel this grief. I'll just send love and light. No need to deal with anger. If I meditate enough, my problems will vanish. These words may sound comforting, but they skip the deeper work. They coat pain with sugar instead of healing it. And the shadow loves this, because it stays unchallenged. The illusion of only light. Many people entering spirituality believe they must be endlessly positive, forgiving, calm. They fear that feeling anger or sadness means they've failed. But Jung warned, wholeness doesn't come from chasing the light. It comes from making the darkness conscious. When you deny anger, grief, or fear in the name of higher vibration, you split yourself in two. Outwardly, you look serene. Inwardly, the shadow grows heavier. Eventually, it breaks through, often in the very communities preaching love and light. That's why we sometimes see conflicts, scandals, and abuses in spiritual circles. They're eruptions of denied shadows. Common spiritual traps. The positivity trap, believing good vibes only, will erase pain. In truth, it often leads to shallow connections where no one feels safe being real. The forgiveness trap. Forgiving too quickly, without processing hurt. Real forgiveness requires honesty about the wound. The detachment trap. Hiding behind ideas of non-attachment to avoid intimacy or responsibility. True detachment brings freedom, not escape. The guru trap. Giving your power away to a teacher, imagining they hold all the answers. This keeps you from facing your own shadow and authority. The shadow in sacred practices. Even the most sacred practices can be hijacked. Meditation can become a way to numb instead of awaken. Prayer can become a script to silence fear instead of meeting it. Yoga can turn into performance instead of presence. The shadow doesn't care if you avoid yourself through drinking, working, or chanting. Avoidance is avoidance, the path of integration. So what's the alternative? Integration. Real spirituality doesn't bypass the shadow, it embraces it. It asks you to bring your pain, your anger, your longing into the circle of light. Imagine lighting a candle in a dark room. The shadows don't disappear, they shift. They reveal textures and shapes you couldn't see before. That's what happens when spiritual practice shines light on the shadow instead of denying it. Try this. The next time you want to cover a heavy emotion with a positive thought, pause. Sit with the feeling for a moment, breathe into it, write it down. Ask yourself, what is this emotion here to teach me? What part of my shadow is asking to be seen? Then bring that awareness into your meditation or prayer. The gift of wholeness. When spirituality embraces the shadow, it becomes grounded. You no longer need to fake bliss or pretend to be above human struggles. You can stand in truth, both wound and gift, both dark and light. And here's the paradox. The more you face your shadow, the more authentic your light becomes. Compassion deepens because you've met your own pain. Your presence grows magnetic because people trust what is real. Your faith strengthens because it's not built on denial but on integration. The shadow doesn't disappear in spiritual spaces sometimes. It grows even stronger under the mask of light. But when you face it, your practices stop being escapes and start becoming tools of transformation. In the next part, we'll step into Jung's deeper philosophy, the idea of the collective shadow. Because the shadow isn't just personal, it lives in cultures, in communities, even in history. And seeing this bigger picture shows why shadow work isn't just for you, it's for the world. Until now, we've been talking about the shadow as something personal, your triggers, your patterns, your relationships, your work. But Jung believed it doesn't stop there. The shadow stretches outward into society itself. He called this the collective shadow, the hidden side of whole cultures, communities, even humanity as a whole. The collective shadow in history. Think of moments when entire nations acted in ways that horrified the world. Wars, oppression, systemic injustice. These weren't just the choices of a few leaders. They were eruptions of the collective shadow. When a society glorifies progress, its shadow may hide exploitation. When a culture celebrates purity, its shadow may hide cruelty. When a nation waves the banner of freedom, its shadow may hide control. Jung warned that whenever we idolize only the light, the dark grows stronger in silence. Everyday examples of the collective shadow. We don't have to look only at history books. The collective shadow shows itself in daily life. A workplace that demands constant positivity while quietly breeding burnout. Communities that prize politeness but whisper gossip underground. Social media feeds full of curated perfection that hide loneliness and envy. Each of these reflects what happens inside us individually, a mask on the outside, a shadow underneath. Why? The collective shadow matters. Here's the striking part. When we avoid our personal shadow, we feed the collective one. The judgments we don't own, the wounds we don't heal, the anger we refuse to face, they don't vanish. They spill outward, shaping the groups we belong to. That's why Jung saw shadow work not only as self-help, but as a moral responsibility. Integrating your shadow doesn't just make your own life healthier, it makes the world safer. People who own their darkness don't need scapegoats. They don't need enemies to carry what they won't face in themselves. Archetypes and the collective shadow. Jung also spoke of archetypes, universal patterns of the psyche. When distorted, these archetypes can fuel the collective shadow. The hero archetype can become destructive when it refuses vulnerability, leading to reckless aggression. The caregiver archetype can twist into control or martyrdom when it denies its own needs. The innocent archetype can become dangerous when it clings to denial, refusing to see reality. By becoming aware of these archetypal distortions, we start to see how the collective shadow operates not just out there in society, but also inside us, facing the collective shadow. So, how do we deal with something so massive? We start small. By integrating our personal shadow, we weaken the collective one. Every time you face your anger, instead of projecting it, you make it less likely that anger will poison your community. Every time you own your envy, you make it less likely that envy will corrode your relationships. Jung believed this ripple effect was crucial. He warned that the collective shadow, left unchecked, is one of the greatest dangers to civilization. But faced honestly, it opens the door to collective healing. Reflection. When you feel a strong reaction to cultural events, outrage, disgust, obsession, pause and ask, what part of the collective shadow is showing itself here? And how might my personal shadow be resonating with it? This kind of awareness keeps you grounded and prevents you from unconsciously fueling the very patterns you oppose. Hope in the darkness. And here's the paradox again. Just like your personal shadow hides gifts, so does the collective shadow. Inside cultural crises are seeds of transformation. Movements for justice, compassion, and innovation are born as responses to darkness. The collective shadow, when faced, can become a catalyst for growth, not just for individuals, but for humanity. Jung's philosophy reminds us, shadow work isn't a luxury. It's not just about being happier or more authentic. It's about survival, evolution, and the future of our world. Which brings us to the last part of this journey, the conclusion. We'll gather everything we've explored, the rituals, the reflections, the results, and see how integrating the shadow leads not just to healing, but to a life that feels fully alive. We began this journey with a simple but unsettling question. What if the very parts of yourself you've tried hardest to bury are the keys to your freedom? Along the way, we uncovered the many faces of the shadow, the dragon in myth, the triggers that spark in daily life, the hidden wounds in love, the masks we wear at work, the illusions in spirituality, even the dark undercurrents of entire cultures. And through all of it, one truth has stayed the same. The shadow is not your enemy, it is your guide. Think back to what we've seen. The anger that felt dangerous but actually revealed boundaries. The envy that seemed shameful but pointed toward desire. The fear that felt paralyzing but secretly guarded courage. Each of these emotions, when denied, turns toxic. But when faced with compassion, they transform into medicine. That's the heart of integration, turning what once felt unbearable into a source of energy and wholeness. Shadow work isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. It's not about erasing flaws, but embracing contradictions. Not about light without dark, but about light with dark. That balance is what makes life full and alive. So, what does this mean for you? It means you don't have to keep running from the parts you fear. You don't have to waste energy hiding behind masks or playing roles. You can open that closet door, step inside, and see that the monsters you dreaded are also guardians of your gifts. And you don't need to do it all at once. Start small. Notice your triggers and ask what they reveal. Keep a journal and let your shadow speak on the page. Create rituals of release to signal your readiness for change. In relationships, treat conflicts as mirrors. At work and in society, notice the masks and projections, and choose honesty instead of performance. These aren't quick fixes, they're lifelong companions. But over time, they bring results. Authenticity, resilience, deeper love, and the quiet power of being fully yourself. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Shadow work is the act of reclaiming your fate, stepping out of old patterns and into conscious choice. And here's the truth. The shadow will always be with you. Integration doesn't mean you'll never feel anger, envy, or fear again. It means you'll know how to meet them when they arrive. You'll recognize them not as curses but as messages. You'll be able to say, "I see you, you belong, and I choose how to use your energy." That is the real ritual. That is the real reflection. And those are the results of a life lived not in fear of your depths, but from your depths. So here's my invitation. Before you move on, take one moment right now. Name a part of yourself you've been avoiding. Whisper it, write it down, or simply hold it in your heart. And instead of pushing it away, welcome it. That's where the work begins. And if this journey has spoken to you, stay connected. Share your reflections. Tell your stories. Because none of us walk this path alone. And if you want to keep exploring, come with us from darkness into light, from fragmentation into wholeness. The shadow waits for no one. The only question left is, are you ready to turn and face it?